Good morning and welcome to our webinar on the both newly constructed and existing multifamily buildings this morning. I want to let everybody know that we are recording the webinar, just so you know that. And also, we will be posting both the recording and the slides following the webinar. Usually takes us a couple of days, but we will get them up and let you know as soon as we have them ready. My name is Misty Brucieri. I'm the coordinator for the statewide Breach Codes program, and I am joined today by our study authors, or at least some of our study authors, Ada Shen and Antonia Frazier from Frontier Associates and Avni Goyal from TRC. They're going to run through their their study process, and how they did the analysis, kind of go over all the assumptions they made, and help us try to understand those results and potential impacts from that study. Since we are looking at two studies today, we have a pretty full agenda. And although it doesn't look like that on the agenda we've got listed here, is a lot of information we need to cover. I'm going to start with a high-level review of kind of some energy code basics for the multifamily buildings, just to set the table for us and just take that first look at things. And then I'm going to turn things over to Ada and Antonia to talk about the multifamily new construction analysis. Following that, we'll have a break. Just a short break, but a little break so that we can kind of reset our minds and get ready for Avni Goyal's discussion on multifamily alterations analysis. Excuse me, that will be Avni and Ada. I apologize. That will be both of them. So following that, I'll wrap up with a summary of kind of where we're at, some of the policy options, and some of the resources available to support you as you move through the process. Before we start, we have a couple of questions we'd like to ask you, just to get kind of a sense of your interest today and some of the kind of the building stock in your jurisdiction, if you're familiar with it. So I'm going to go ahead and go here. If you can, there's the QR code. I also have the link. I'm going to drop the link in the chat here, just in case you can't use the QR code, but I'd appreciate it if you'd go ahead and take a look at that poll, connect to the poll and answer those questions if you would, and then we'll take a look at the results. I'm going to give everybody just a minute to do that. For folks that are joining us a little bit late, we are doing a little bit of a very, very short poll. It's just a couple of questions for you, just to give us an idea of kind of what you're interested in today, and kind of a little bit about the building stock that's in your jurisdiction. Okay, folks, I'm going to have to come back to the poll. I don't know what it is. I have a curse. That's all I can say. I tested this poll. It was working beautifully all the way up until just right now. And for some reason right now, it's not showing me the results. And I apologize. I do not know oh, here we go. It's starting to come. So far, we only have a couple of responses. If others would please go ahead and fill out the poll, we'd really appreciate it. It would really help us to tailor our discussion today. I'm going to give you just one more minute, if you would. Folks having trouble connecting? Okay, well, I've got about 5 responses so far, but I'll go ahead and switch over and show you what those look like. We can take a look at that. Basically, it looks like most folks are interested in both new construction and existing. Appreciate that answer. And then just looking at the percentage of the different types of buildings in your territory, it looks like for the most part, we've got low rise as the highest percentage here, and then a little bit of mid rise followed by high rise, which is pretty much as we expected. But thank you very much for doing that. We really appreciate the poll. All righty, I'm going to go ahead and go back here and return to our presentation. Okay. I'm going to get started with just a high-level review of some really basic information about the Energy Code, just to set the table for us and get us ready for the discussion. Just going to quickly cover those basics. There are 3 metrics for new construction in the Energy Code in this cycle. There were last time as well, but in this cycle, we've switched the TDV metric to what is termed LSC, or the long-term system cost. That LSC metric it's the CEC's projected value of the cost to the whole California energy system over like 30 years. So it's what we often term as a societal cost. And that's how the CEC looks at compliance and the energy code development when they look at it. They look at the whole societal cost, not just the cost to an individual. For new construction, like I said, there are 3 metrics. 2 of them are the LSC. The LSC has 2 components. The first is the efficiency LSC, and that basically covers the building envelope, the energy used to provide heating and cooling, water heating, lighting, and ventilation. All of those kind of efficiency functions. And then the second component of the LSC is the total LSC, which also includes the impacts from both PV and renewables and any kind of demand response or demand management activities. The third metric is source energy. And that source energy metric is what is used we use it as a proxy for GHG emissions. It gives us an idea of the total amount of energy it takes to get from including production, transmission, distribution, and what we use at the site. And it gives us an idea of the emissions based on both the energy use and what we save. For new construction, we have those 3 metrics. They provide a balancing effect. So it doesn't allow somebody to say, for example, build a very inefficient building and then add a whole bunch of PV and just make up for it that way. By having the 3 metrics, it balances all of the California's goals and keeps us kind of aligned that way. For existing buildings, we only have the 1 metric, the efficiency metric. And that is acknowledging the constraints that exist in existing buildings. It may be difficult to install PV, for example, and you can only control so many things. We know that for the most part, most existing buildings are based on gas, so your source energy is going to be a little bit more tricky to control right up front. So they just are looking at efficiency right now. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a different metrics, and so it's just kind of good to get your mind into that mindset before we get started talking, because we're going to cover a lot of ground today. Okay. So when we do these analyses, we use prototype building designs. Those prototype designs are actually created by the DOE, and they are also used by the CEC when they set the state code requirements. So we use the same designs, and that helps us stay consistent with the compliance metrics and the compliance structure. For our study, both of the new construction and the alterations study use what the CEC terms as a high-rise multifamily building. The CEC has a demarcation between low and high rise at 3 and 4 stories. 3 stories and below is low rise, 4 and above is high rise. It's actually more like considered a mid-rise building. It's a 6-story building, 5 stories above ground, 1 with non-res on the ground floor, and then 4 stories of residential. For the low rise, we actually use 2 different prototypes here. For the new construction, the low rise building is a 3-story, what we call a loaded corridor design. And what that really means is it's one big building and you enter your dwelling units from the interior. There's hallways with doors, kind of like a hotel. But for the existing low rise building, we use a more common building design that's been fairly common throughout the state. It's a little bit of a smaller building. It's only got 8 units, and it's called a garden style building. And that typically is, a building that there's often a big courtyard in the middle, and everybody enters their dwelling units from the outside. It could be that you enter from the outside as well, but you always enter from the outside. I kind of liken the difference between a hotel and a motel in that way. And so we've got 3 different prototypes we're going to be looking at. And so I wanted to just kind of give you an idea of what those are at first, and then take a look at the base assumptions for the key equipment before we get started. Now, Ada, Antonia, and Avni are going to cover this in much more detail later. So don't worry if you don't get everything here. I'm just going to keep it high level for this introductory part here. When we talk about base assumptions, essentially that means that's being kind of what you're compared to. It's the minimum expectation. And it's not mandatory though. So that doesn't mean you absolutely must use this equipment. It means that's what you'll be compared to. If you use different equipment, you'll have to match the performance of this equipment. Okay, so it's not mandatory, just to be clear. So for space heating, and actually for both space and water heating, the CEC has different requirements for high-rise and low-rise buildings, acknowledging the differences in their designs, right? And so for space heating, for the most part for new construction, space heating is, the base assumption is a heat pump. There are a couple of differences in climate zones 1 and 16. Those are kind of our extreme heating climate zones. And in those cases, we have a dual fuel heat pump as the base case. And that just means there's a furnace as backup, essentially. For the low rise, we have a similar situation with climate zone 16. We don't have it in climate zone 1 on the low rise, but for 16, instead of using the heat pump, they use the AC and furnace as the base case for low rise. Okay. And then looking at water heating, for the high-rise systems, high-rise buildings, there's a little bit more flexibility in the base case than there is for low-rise. So for water heating units that serve individual units, the base case can either be a heat pump or it can be an instantaneous gas unit. If the water heating is a central system serving all of the units, again, it can be a heat pump or it can be a gas boiler. And so in that high-rise design, there's quite a bit of flexibility there for water heating. For the low-rise for new construction, it's not quite as flexible. Again, we have for systems serving individual units, we assume they're all heat pumps. Okay, but for that central system, again, it could be either a heat pump or a gas system. And so the way that works with the compliance is that you're compared to whichever type of system you use. Okay, so it's not entirely, this isn't entirely accurate, but effectively it's compliance neutral. You're not going to be penalized for using gas or rewarded for using gas, either way. Okay, so like I said, Avni, Ada, and Antonia are going to cover this again in their presentation, so don't worry about not if you don't get it all. But I just wanted to give everybody kind of a first look at this information so that you are kind of prepared to try to start sectioning these things off between high rise and low rise, and then there's the new construction and existing requirements. For our existing buildings, we typically assume that that gas is the base case. Most buildings in California that are existing have gas base case for both. Okay. So I think we talk about this quite frequently, but the question does come up fairly regularly. A lot of folks are not used to dealing with the energy code. They may work with the building code in its entirety, but not the energy code. And in order to amend the energy code, the amendment has to be cost effective. And so we do the studies to meet that legal requirement. That is the first kind of main point that we do, main reason we do the studies. However, they're very valuable for a lot of other reasons. They actually, even if it's not a legal requirement, it gives us an idea of where those opportunities are, what the options are, what might be some better pathways and where we might run into some difficulties, some challenges. It gives us much more information so that we can understand and then also communicate the potential impacts from one of these policies. And also, it helps us identify where opportunities might be available specifically locally that may not be available statewide, because we do the studies across the whole state in each climate zone. So it gives us a lot of different information that is really valuable as you're developing a policy. And so while they take a while and they're fairly complex and they're a little bit tricky to get through, they are very valuable additions and good resources to use. So I encourage you to take a look at them and excuse me, do read them when you have a chance. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Ada Shen and Antonia Fraser from Frontier to give us a review of the analysis of the multifamily new construction.
Thanks for the introduction, Misty. I'm Ada, and between myself and Antonia, we'll be presenting the multifamily new construction cost effectiveness analysis methodology and results. So to start, just have a quick reminder about some of the purposes of the cost effectiveness analysis. Like Misty mentioned, the next slide. Thanks. The objective is to identify cost-effective and non-preemptive measure packages. The team focuses on packages that can be widely applicable across the state. And to find this cost effectiveness, we have two metrics. First is on-bill cost effectiveness, and this is cost effectiveness from the customer's point of view, where we use utility rates and then the second is LSC, or long-term system cost. As Misty mentioned, this is the metric developed by the CEC to quantify long-term cost of operating California's energy system. Next, we wanted to set the stage with some of the relevant code updates, as well as reminders that pertain to multifamily new construction in the 2025 Energy Code. Starting with the code updates, is the transition from TDV, or time-dependent valuation, to LSC as a compliance metric. And LSC, as I mentioned, can be thought of that long-term cost of operating California's energy system, and it's a similar idea to TDV in quantifying the societal impacts, but they transition to use units of dollars. Second is that heat pump water heaters are now prescriptively required in new multifamily buildings 3 stories or less for buildings using individual water heating systems. Lastly, it's just a reminder, this isn't new in the 2025 code, but heat pump space heaters are prescriptively required in multifamily new construction buildings, except in climate zone 16 for 3-story. It's a gas furnace, and for climate zone 1 and 16 and the 5-story is a dual fuel heat pump. So that's the heat pump with gas furnace as backup. So given this context of the energy code, we'll talk through our methodology for the cost effectiveness analysis. On a high level, this analysis builds on the 2022 REACH code analysis to provide continuity. we'll be talking about two packages. First is what we're calling the electric heating package. This refers to electric water heating and space heating where applicable. This is effectively a electric water heating measure in most climate zones because, as you mentioned in the previous slide, the heat pump space heater is already prescriptively required except in climate zones 1 and 16, as described previously. Second is the mixed fuel efficiency and increased solar thermal water heating package, which we'll describe in further detail later on. The team uses the 2025 prescriptive requirements as the starting point to set that baseline. And the analysis uses CBEC 2025 1.0 version. This is the compliance software for California. Cost effectiveness is evaluated over a 30-year analysis period. Next, we have the two prototypes. Two multifamily prototypes that we'll be evaluating in this study is the 3-story loaded corridor and the 5-story mixed use prototype. And combined, it's estimated these two prototypes are estimated to represent 91% of new multifamily construction in California. And though the 5-story includes commercial spaces, the energy savings and cost effectiveness of this analysis will only pertain to the residential portion of the building. The next slide. Our analysis baseline uses the 2025 prescriptive requirements. So this is the heat pump space heater, except 3-story in climate zone 16, and in the 5-story climate zone 1 and 16, so dual fuel heat pump. We assume a gas central water heater with solar thermal. So buildings that install gas central water heating is also required to install solar thermal water heating systems with 20% solar savings fraction in climate zones 1 through 9 and 35% solar savings fraction in climate zones 10 through 16. The team assumes minimum efficiency equipment as to not violate federal preemption and assumes in-unit electric cooking and clothes drying, the prescriptive PV, solar PV that's required, as well as the battery, the prescriptive battery for 5-story is assumed in our analysis baseline. Now we'll talk a little bit more in detail about these upgrade packages. First is the electric heating. So as I mentioned, it's effectively essential heat pump water heater measure in most climate zones. And as Nissi mentioned, there's flexibility to install either a heat pump water heater or a gas water heating system, and the baseline will follow your proposed. The equipment will follow. So, for example, if you install a central heat pump water heater, you're compared against a heat pump water heater and not the gas system. And so in this measure, because central heat pump water heater is actually not federally regulated, the proposed central heat pump water heater is a higher efficiency equipment than the baseline heat pump water heater that assumes a pretty low efficiency equipment. But to quantify cost effectiveness, we're comparing this measure to the gas system in order to in order to quantify what would be the benefit of this measure in comparison to the gas system. And for climate zones that do not have a heat pump space heater already prescriptively required, this package also includes the heat pump space heater. So in the table that highlighted in red are the climate zones and prototypes where this would be an upgrade. Next slide. So the second package is a mixed fuel with efficiency and increased solar thermal. In this table, we have the efficiency and solar thermal measures that are assumed for each climate zone. And so this includes a higher efficiency window measure, which is reducing the U factor from 0.28 to 0.24. There's verified low leakage ducts in conditioned space, And then the upsized solar thermal systems. So you'll notice in climate zones 1 through 9, it's a 35% solar savings fraction system, and in 10 through 16, it's a 50% solar savings fraction solar thermal water heating system. Next, just have some assumptions and caveats. So as we mentioned, the focus is on dwelling units and common area spaces only, so the commercial spaces are not evaluated. The utility costs are based on residential rates, and the impacts are combined across all residential uses. So the energy use is from all the residential spaces. For example, the electricity will include the units and also the residential common area spaces. And utility costs are based on NEM 2.0. So this is a 30-year cost effectiveness analysis. And so for the on-bill cost effectiveness metric, we use the 2025 LSC escalation rates. So to orient you all to this graph, the x-axis is the year and the y-axis is the escalation rate, which is the percent increase of the utility rate that year. You'll notice an increase in the electricity prices around 2030, where it's assumed that people will switch to electricity, so the demand of gas will decrease, and therefore the prices will increase. There's an 8% cap on the escalation rates, so you notice that flat line across the top, and then a drop after 2045, where it's likely due to meeting decarbonization goals in 2045, after which there will be very little gas in residential buildings, and expect the costs to stabilize. We're using these escalation rates because these are the rates that are in the current compliance software. And you'll notice, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, that's it. So just want to note that the CEC is looking into escalation rates for their IPER, the Integrated Energy Policy Report. So escalation rates will continue to evolve as new information comes in, and the team is actively monitoring it. And that's it for the methodology. I'll hand it over to Antonia for the cost and cost effectiveness.
Thank you, Ada. So I will walk us through the cost and cost effectiveness for both packages in both prototypes. So for cost effectiveness, as Ada mentioned, we have two methodologies where we are evaluating cost effectiveness, one being on-bill customer base using IOU's time of use rates along with SMUD and CPU, and also applying those escalation rates. And the second approach, we are using LSC per the CEC's approach. And as Ada mentioned again, our evaluation period is 30 years. And the key metric that we're looking at is net present value, which is the present value of the lifetime benefit minus the present value of the lifetime cost. Next slide, please. So for central water heating, the system design and cost are coming from the 2025 ACEEE Central Heat Pump Water Heating Systems for Decarbonizing Multifamily Buildings. For 3-story, the system is based off of a single-pass stand-in system with 4 heat pump water heaters, and the 5-story is based on a single-pass Mitsubishi system with 2 heat pump water heaters. And the replacement cost and replacement water heating equipment and tanks are replaced at year 25, and the solar thermal collectors are replaced at year 20, and glycol replaced at every 9 years. As we can see, the first incremental cost per unit for both prototypes is negative, and the life cycle incremental cost is also negative for both prototypes. Next slide. For heat pump space heating, the costs are coming from the 2022 all-electric multifamily compliance pathway case report and adjusted with inflation. Our replacement costs assume that the gas furnace and AC are replaced at year 15, as well as the heat pump and dual fuel heat pump being replaced at year 15. And these lifetime costs are also coming from the same case report as the cost. And again, for both systems, the first incremental costs are showing as negative, and the life cycle incremental costs per unit are also negative. So here we have our life cycle incremental costs for our efficiency measures, which are the high performance windows and verified low leakage ducts in conditioned spaces, both being applied to 3-story and 5-story mixed fuel packages. The window costs are coming from the 2025 case team that use Energy Star data. And this is, again, just being applied to Climate Zone 16 and the verified low leakage ducts and conditioned spaces. The costs are coming from the 2022 multifamily new construction reach code report and applied and adjusted to include inflation. And this measure, again, is being applied to all climate zones. And our last costs are increased solar thermal. So this increased solar thermal is being applied to both prototypes for the mixed fuel plus efficiency package. For climate zones 1 through 9, the solar savings fraction, again, is going from 20% to 35%. And in climate zones 10 through 16, it's going from 35% to 50%. And in this table, we're showing the average incremental cost per unit for those climate zones for each prototype. Next, I'll move into the results and show and walk us through how each of these packages performed. So for 3-story, here we're showing the on-bill net present value for the electric heating package and the mixed fuel plus efficiency packages. The electric heating package is on bill cost effective in most climate zones, except it is not cost effective in many of the regions that are served by Southern California Gas Company due to the lower gas rates relative to electricity rates. And the mixed fuel package is on bill cost effective in every climate zone. In this next slide, this graph is showing the LSC net present value, and where we have both packages, electric heating and mixed fuel plus efficiencies, is cost effective in every climate zone. And here we have our source energy compliance margin for 3-story for both packages, electric heating and mixed fuel. Both packages have positive source energy compliance margins. We're seeing that the electric heating package has higher margins compared to the mixed fuel plus efficiency.
Antonia?
Yes.
We got a question in the chat I think would be great to answer right now. And he's asking him if the taller bars, the electric heating, are they more cost effective than the mixed fuel? I think it would be helpful to answer that for him. I'm going to go back one here. I know we're showing the compliance margin, but I think that's very key to the results here.
Yes, so the taller bars in blue, which is the electric heating package, is more LSC on bill cost effective than the mixed fuel plus efficiency package in
You can
orange.
see that with the higher net present value, right? So the
Yes,
difference between the benefits and cost is quite a bit higher on the electric heating side.
yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry to
Mhm.
interrupt you.
Next slide, please. So now we'll move into the 5-story, and here we're showing the 5-story on-bill net present value for both packages. And again, the electric heating package on-bill cost effective in most climate zones, except it is not not cost effective in many of the same regions that are served by Southern California Gas Company, again, due to the lower gas rates and relative electricity rates. And here we have the 5-story LSC net present value. And similar to 3-story, the electric heating package does have a higher cost effectiveness compared to the mixed fuel plus efficiency package. But it is cost effective, LSC cost effective for both packages here. For the 5-story, the source energy margin, both have positive margins. And in all climate zones except for 1, 13, and 16, the electric heating package has a higher compliance margin compared to the mixed fuel package. Lastly, I'll move into discussion, recommendations, and highlight key takeaways. So based on our analysis of this study, all results have positive compliance margins and cost-effective in at least one of the cost-effective metrics for both prototypes. A possible policy outcome of this study is to set the reach code margin at the lower margin between the electric heating and mixed fuel package. As an example here for the 5-story prototype in climate zone 12, the margin is 12% for the mixed fuel package and 14% for the electric heating. So we would set the margin at 12%. Thank you. We appreciate your time, and we're opening it up to questions.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Ada and Antonia. A lot of great information there. Do we have any questions? Looks like that may have been answered already. Okay, so there's a question about the mixed fuel package and if it includes other measures. Can you just run through what that package actually is for us really quickly?
So the mixed fuel package, it has the window measure, which is just for climate zone 16, and the verified low leakage ducts in conditioned spaces and increased solar thermal.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions for Ada or Antonia about the new construction analysis? A little bit more of a narrow analysis than we do sometimes for some of the others because of the baselines in the code now. A little bit more, it's actually a little more straightforward than it has been in the past.
Sorry.
Don't be
So many
sorry. Go
questions
ahead.
this
This is what
morning.
we're here for.
The all those results were only for the space heating, right? Not the water heating yet.
No, those
Is that
are focused
those
on
are
the
the
water
water?
heating. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
No
Thank you.
worries. Yeah, for the most part, the space heating is already heat pumps. There's a couple of situations where it's not, but that was water heating. Any other questions?
If there's time, I was wondering if you could just go back. I think it was maybe 2 slides where there was a pretty big difference between, I think it was the electric heating and, yeah, this one, like for climate zones 6, 7. Yeah, you were on the one more forward, 33,
That
I
one,
guess,
or wait a minute, this one.
the other
This one?
direction.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Sorry, one more.
That's just the compliance margin. Are you looking for the margin
Okay,
or for
yeah,
the?
this one, the
Okay.
compliance margin. Yeah, I was wondering if you could just maybe elaborate on the differences in the electric heating margin, like in the climate zones 6 through 9 or so versus the ones on the outer edges. If you can just elaborate on like why those differences are so much more significant. I assume it has to do with the more temperate climate.
Not sure which of you is the best one to answer that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I know off the top of my head exactly what would all be contributing to the differences here. Just want to think off something to note is that the electric heating package is compared against a in those climate zones it's just the heat pump water heater measure that is in play here. And so it is compared against a really low efficiency heat pump water heater. And so and versus the mixed fuel, it's compared against, so it would be the benefit of the solar thermal water heating and the leakage ducts and conditioned space in comparison to a gas water heating system. And so this is the way that the code measures compliance. And so it's not quite apples to apples here. And so that's part of the differences. But I think I might need to get back to you to look into exactly what may be causing the large differences in those more mild climate zones.
Could part of it also be the very mild climate there and the fact that water heating is so much more of the budget than it is in others? I think that may be contributing as well to some of that savings.
Yeah,
I
that's a good
see.
point.
Fabulous.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Ada and Antonia?
Yeah, I had a quick question. Thank you for the information. There was a bullet point on the heat pump water heater not being regulated by the federal government. What could we provide more detail on that bullet point?
Yeah, so that's the central heat pump water heater. So the point was about how you're not allowed to adopt a REACH code that requires that violates federal preemption, which means that if the equipment is regulated by the federal government, so for example, heat pump space heater, you have to adopt you can't require high efficiency heat pump space heater. Or for the individual heat pump water heater, that is also a federally regulated equipment, and so you can't require NEA Tier 3 heat pump water heater, individual heat pump water heater. But for the central heat pump water heater, it actually is not federally regulated. And so the measure here is a higher efficient than what is assumed in the software. And so that's why we get a source compliance margin for the water heating measure. Otherwise, if we assumed what was the efficiency that's required in the software, this margin should be 0. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's very nuanced. So it's a good question.
So those individual units are still federally regulated though, right? Those we have to stick with the minimum, just the central system.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we had one more question asking if you could go over the policy recommendation here at the end again.
Sure. So basically what we're saying is for any climate zone, you look at both of the source energy margins, and you would pick the lowest between the two. So for here, we have climate zone 12, and the source margin is 14 for the electric heating and 12 for the mixed fuel plus efficiency package. And so you would set the margin at 12 because that's the lowest between the two.
And
So
so
that's something.
effectively,
Go ahead.
oh
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was
The
going to say
point is
so.
that, go ahead. No, I'm
Sorry about that. I was just going to say that way you know that both options can meet that margin cost effectively if you set it at the lower one, right?
Yes.
That's the reason. Sorry, go ahead, Ada. I apologize.
no. I was going to say the same thing, but yeah, well said.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So I guess when they're complying with it, they could install either that mixed fuel water heating package or the electric heating, or they could do anything else that would increase their compliance margin.
They could.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
of course.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, I'm going to say thank you very much to Ada and Antonia. Really appreciate it. And we are going to actually take a very short break here, just a 5-minute break. We know we're going to change topics here, and we want to give you just a second to clear your mind from new construction and start thinking more about existing buildings and how the analysis might impact them. So thank you very much, Antonia and Ada. And we'll be back in just 5 minutes at 9:55. Thanks. We'll get started again in just 1 minute. All righty. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to go heat up some coffee or tea, whatever you're having for a nice beverage this morning, and maybe grab some breakfast. We are back, and we are going to proceed with the second part of our webinar here, and I'm going to turn things over to Avni Goel from TRC to talk to us about the multifamily alterations cost effectiveness analysis that her and her team did. And I apologize, Ada, I keep leaving you off there. It's Avni and Ada are going to talk about this. I don't know why I keep doing that. I'm sorry.
No worries.
All righty, take it away.
It is a lot of A's, so part of it is covered. Hey everyone, I'm Avni Goel from TRC. On behalf of the IOU statewide REACH Code team, Ada Shen from Frontier Energy, and I would like to present the multifamily alterations cost effectiveness study. This presentation will inform the technical feasibility, cost impacts, and cost effective opportunities for decarbonization in existing multifamily buildings. Please feel free to share any questions in the chat. We can try to answer as we go. And similar to new construction presentation, we'll have a dedicated Q&A at the end to take up any recurring questions or any new questions as they come up. We'll also share contact details at the end to reach out for any outstanding questions after the webinar. Today we are going to cover talk about the background and context of the study, how it informed the scope of analysis, including the prototypes, the measures, the vintages, followed by the methodology and data on incremental costs and the cost effectiveness analysis. We'll conclude the presentation with some final summary of cost effectiveness results, limitations, followed by a Q&A. Next slide, please. Can you move on to the next slide? Thank you. Yeah, for the background, so multifamily alterations has been a largely untapped market for REACH codes for a long time, with buildings contributing around 25% towards California greenhouse gas emissions, and a substantial 31% of the existing dwelling units in California is multifamily. More than 80% of the multifamily buildings are already 25 years old, that is before 2000, nearing the timeline for equipment replacements or other modernization retrofits. Previous REACH codes and 2024 case studies found a relatively higher savings percentage given the leak year envelopes and inefficient existing systems baseline. Timely policy interventions like REACH codes will promote infrastructure resilience, energy affordability, and economic competitiveness of the real estate. Next slide. To understand the existing multifamily building stock, we did a literature review, including the Residential Appliance Saturation Survey, RAS 2019. which included apartment condos with 2 to 4 dwelling units or 5+ dwelling unit categories. As we can see on the right, the table shows that almost 50% of these buildings are pre-1978, which is before any Title 24 code happened. There would be some retrofit turnovers that would have happened since then, but this is the as-built date. Key attributes that we evaluated as part of the building stock analysis were the size of the buildings, the dwelling units, attic insulation level, wall insulation, whether there is a solar PV or not, the cooling systems, heating systems, the types, and the fuel categories, as well as for the water heating, what kind of systems and the fuel types they have. We'll later talk about how this data also informed which vintages we selected and why. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide. Some key trends that we observed includes the first graph, which is wall insulation. It shows the trend over time, 0 to 12, which is going from 1940s to 2010s. As we can see, during 1960s, which is number 4, external wall insulation begin to see rapid adoption, which keeps increasing, shown by the dark blue curve, which keeps continuing. And as of 2000, we can see that there is more insulation and there is much lesser buildings without one. The second graph shows window types installed over time. The prevalence of single pane windows, which is the blue curve, declines over time, and the prevalence of double pane windows, shown by orange, shows a rapid increase, with the trend being reversed around and after 2000s. Key trends in the appliance type. The first graph shows the percentage of water heating equipment over time. While the standard storage gas water heaters remain the common option across all periods, their prevalence declines during 2013 to 2019, time period 12, coinciding with the risk of a rise of tankless gas water heater installations. The second graph talks about space heating equipment installations over time. The gas furnaces have the highest rate of installation for the majority of the recorded time periods, beginning in the 1970s, with floor or wall furnaces and rising popularity in the 1940s to 60s. However, we assume that even if they were installed in the 60s, they would have been replaced with a gas furnace by now. Therefore, the team assumed a gas furnace and AC in both the vintages that were selected for the analysis. Slide. In addition to the literature review and the RAS data analysis, we also conducted interviews with city representatives to understand their needs and perspectives as it comes to multifamily alterations. And this is, please note that this is a shared recollection of what the perspectives are. This does not represent the actual statistics of the jurisdictions. As reported in the interviews, the existing multifamily building stock was primarily 3 stories or less. And I believe in the initial poll we conducted today, we saw a similar trend. Air conditioners are only common in buildings built in 2000s or buildings in warmer climates. For heating systems, gas furnaces were reported to be the predominant installation. The existing water heating systems is suggested to be gas storage, although there is not enough information to have definitive understanding of what the water heating systems look like between individual or central. And the types of alteration, the permits that we've been seeing are predominantly gut rehabilitations, seismic retrofits, or other safety-related retrofits, and bathroom or kitchen remodels. There could be some aesthetic, cosmetic updates as well that may not necessarily require permits and hence may not be breach code triggered. Next slide. I'll quickly talk about some of the barriers as identified by the interview participants as it pertains to the multifamily alterations. The cost effectiveness study has been scoped keeping these barriers in mind and trying to address them, especially the economic feasibility, where there is concern regarding increased retrofit costs, utility bills, how it impacts the cost effectiveness when the incentives or any federal credits are declining. There is also limited awareness about the benefits, the GHG savings potential, or associated electrical upgrade requirements, permit requirements. The study also discusses some of the concerns related to technical feasibility, what it entails regarding concerns with limited space, accessibility, any electrical plumbing updates required, or insufficient panel capacity. There are other concerns reported related to code adoption, which is permit documentation, incentives availability, information, financing between tenant owner, code development, having enough resources, which would not be directly covered by the study, but definitely kept in mind as we think through policy options. Now we'll talk about the scope of analysis, how the background, the market research informed the prototype characteristics and narrowing down our evaluation. We selected 2 prototypes, low-rise 2-story with 8 dwelling units and a mid-rise 5-story with 88 dwelling units. These 2 prototypes have been selected keeping in mind that they cover 2 variations of steep slope versus low slope, wood framed wall in low rise versus metal framed wall in mid rise, and water heating system where we have individual systems in low rise and central in mid rise. The actual multifamily buildings existing will look very different. They may not exactly look like this, but the attempt of creating the scope is to cover as many variations as possible. In the next slide, we talk about the 2 vintages that were selected. We identified 2 categories, pre-code and post-code, which is defined by historic Title 24 code requirements, the RAS trends, and the retrofit turnover data used by the case team for the 2025 code cycle. The pre-code and post-code is supposed to be 2 bookend vintage scenarios, which covers kind of the worst case and the best case of existing buildings that would be nearing their retrofit timeline. The pre-code loosely represents the pre-1978 building without any Title 24 related updates, and will be requiring significant retrofits, whereas the postcode loosely represents the 90s or 2000s building. The characteristics are assumed based on the 24 requirements from that vintage, and they are old enough as of now that they may be going through equipment burnout or will require efficiency upgrades since the evolution of the code. Yeah, and here as well, we've tried to cover 2 different levels. So the pre-code will have the worst assumptions for infiltration, windows, window U factor, SHGC, the wall cavity insulation, roof insulation and the HVAC efficiencies. So there is the variation between the two indexes that are covered. From a large list of measures that we considered, we narrowed down and selected a list of measures, including wall insulation, cool roof, window replacement, ceiling insulation, air sealing, duct sealing, and duct insulation, and solar PV based on their savings potential for the assumed baseline prototype characteristics. This may not be an exhaustive list, but these are the measures that showed the most potential for energy savings and some cost effectiveness. And we also have equipment replacement measures for the space conditioning system and for water heating. For water heating, we have both individual and central based on the two different prototypes. And both federal code minimum and market minimum efficiencies have been evaluated for the cost effectiveness. I'll pass it on to Ada to talk about the costs and the cost effectiveness results.
Thanks, Avani. Go to the next slide. So the team worked to develop cost assumptions by working with contractors to obtain detailed cost assumptions and also utilize costs from existing studies. Here's a list of some of our sources. So the team worked with a contractor to detail cost estimations for the prototype specific to the study, as well as measures evaluated, some of the measures evaluated where the contractor had experience. We also utilized the opinion dynamics study in collaboration with the tech program, where they developed an incremental cost study to understand the cost difference in installing a heat pump space heater or heat pump water heater in comparison to the AC plus furnace or gas water heater, respectively. So they had different phases. We're utilizing costs from phase 1, which was costs for us obtained in 2023, and then phase 2 costs are obtained in 2024. The report came out in 2025, so fairly recent costs. We're also using the 2025 multifamily envelope case report to inform some measures, including windows and cool roofs. Team also utilized costs from a contractor survey Frontier performed in the summer of 2023 and accounted for inflation accordingly. And finally, LBNL's Tracking the Sun study informed the PV and battery cost assumptions. So the team really worked hard to ensure assumptions were understood and applied appropriately. Next slide. So this table shows the efficiency measures and approximate costs. These costs are approximate and intended to give sort of an idea of the ballpark of costs. The actual costs will vary slightly by climate zones and prototypes. These costs include materials, labor, and other markups, demolition required. You'll notice that the postcode has a lesser cost because when the baseline assumption is more efficient than the pre-code baseline. For example, if the ceiling insulation, there's more ceiling insulation assumed in the postcode than the pre-code, so the cost there is less. Getting into some of the measures, a little more specifically, the ceiling insulation, the team evaluated upgrading the ceiling insulation to R38 or R39. This measure is only evaluated in the 2-story prototype where it's assumed to have a steep slope roof with an attic, so you can actually access that. Air sealing is a 30% reduction in infiltration. The wall insulation is assuming R13, where the strategy is drill and fill wall cavity insulation. There's a cool roof measure, and this is at time of roof replacement. So this would be the incremental cost of achieving a higher age-low reflectance. So this would only apply when someone is already planning on replacing their roof. and it would be to just make that a little bit more efficient. For window replacement, the pre-code assumes a single pane window and the post-code assumes a double pane window, and this measure would be to would assume a double pane window with low E coding. Lastly, we have some duct measures. First one is a duct sealing measure to achieve 15% duct leakage. And then there's a new duct measure with R8 duct insulation and assumes a 5% duct leakage. And these measures are only applied to the 2-story prototype for the second floor units where the ducts would be in the attic. The reason is that CBEC doesn't evaluate duct sealing impacts for ducts in conditioned space, and we anticipate that ducts would not be accessible if they're between floors. Next slide has the heat pump incremental costs. So costs vary by climate zone due to size of equipment. Vary by climate zone to size of equipment. But the example of cost shown in this slide would be for climate zone 3, just to give an idea. For the heat pump space heater measures, these costs come from an average of the cost estimator that we worked with, as well as phase 1 opinion dynamics and tech incremental cost study. Note that the first and lifetime incremental cost for the heat pump space heater is negative, meaning that the furnace and AC costs more than the heat pump space heater. But for the high efficiency, the heat pump space heater and VCHP cost more than the furnace AC. So this again is at time of replacement. So at the time of burnout of your AC and furnace, you would replace it with a heat pump space heater. So the cost is the incremental cost above the furnace AC. Similar situation, equipment replacement of the water heating. So for the water heating, the 2-story assumes an individual water heater, while the 5-story assumes a central heat pump water heater. And so for the individual water heater in the 2-story, these costs come from both from the cost estimator as well as phase 2 opinion dynamics tech incremental cost study. And just want to note that the minimum efficiency 2.0 UEF heat pump water heater and the NIA heat pump water heater are the same cost in this study, and this is because we recognize the 2.0 UEF heat pump water heaters are no longer available on the market. So the contractors we spoke to understandably don't have the cost for that, but just a reminder that the reason why we need to evaluate this minimum efficient heat pump water heater is because a REACH code cannot require something above the federal minimum efficient equipment regulated by the federal government. So that is the reason for that and why the costs are the same there. For the 5-story, we have the central water heater, and this cost solely comes from cost estimator. You'll notice that in both individual heat pump water heater and the central heat pump water heater, the incremental cost is positive, meaning that the heat pump water heater cost is more than the gas water heater, but the individual heat pump water heater is substantially higher than the gas water heater. And you'll notice how that plays out in the cost effectiveness results. And the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the moving into cost effectiveness methodology. I'll go through this somewhat quickly because the methodology is very similar to multifamily new construction. Once again, we have on-bill and LSC metrics for cost effectiveness. This is a 30-year evaluation period. So where equipment needs to be changed out, we assume we include that in the cost, and we will present results in net present value, which is the present value of the lifetime benefit minus the cost. Once again, same slide. We're using the same LSC escalation rates as we did in multifamily new construction. And so won't stay here too long, but if you jumped on and have some questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. But once again, this is developed by the CEC. It's what's used in the compliance software, and we use it to estimate the 30-year cost of the on-bill cost effectiveness. It's the assumption of how much the utility rate is going to increase year over year. These are the utility rates that we applied for the climate zones, and it's based on the predominant IOUs serving the population of each zone, and where some zones are evaluated with multiple utilities, where service territories cross over. So this same as multifamily new construction. Next slide. So I know there's a lot of information and the font is small, so but just wanted to paint some broad strokes. So in the rows are the climate zones, and in the columns are different measures evaluated. This is the LSC cost effectiveness for the low-rise pre-code, and just focusing on the efficiency and PV measures. So just wanted to note that, oh yeah, in green are cost effective and red is not cost effective, and there's somewhat of a gradient. Just wanted to highlight some of the opportunities here. There's opportunities for PV in existing buildings. I did want to note that this analysis was done with NEM 2.0 because that's what was available at the time of developing this analysis. So we do expect the magnitude of the cost effectiveness to decrease with the virtual net billing tariff, but there is a healthy buffer here, so it seems like there should still be some good opportunity there. In adding R13 insulation to an old building that has a fairly low cost, and it's an unintrusive way to improve the envelope, and it does show 30-year cost effectiveness in many climate zones. There's also opportunities for air sealing to reduce the infiltration, and has cost effectiveness in climate zones outside of the more mild Southern California area where there isn't quite enough opportunity for energy savings to offset the cost. And however, there is opportunities for cool roofs in the Southern California region, including, and so this would be increasing the age solar reflectance from 0.20 to 0.25 at time of roof replacement. Next slide. Similar trend, this is the 5-story pre-code. So similar opportunities of PV, air sealing, wall insulation, windows in some of the climate zones, and cool roofs. Next slide. Next, I wanted to show some of the HVAC cost effectiveness results. So these maps are showing cost effectiveness for the standard efficiency heat pump space heater at time of replacement of an AC and furnace, where green is cost effective, both on bill and LSC. Yellow is cost effective LSC only, and orange is cost effective on bill only. Red is not cost effective in either metric. On the left, we have the low rise, and on the right is the mid-rise prototype, both in the pre-code vintage. So going from an air conditioner and furnace to a heat pump space heater is cost effective in at least one metric for all climate zones except climate zone 15 in the low rise. And in the mid-rise, the heat pump space heater is on bill, LSC, on bill and LSC cost effective in all climate zones. Next slide. For water heating in the low rise, on the left, this is a replacement of an individual gas water heater to an individual heat pump water heater. And it's only cost effective in climate zone 12 in the SMUD territory where electricity rates are very low to offset the higher incremental cost. On the right, in the mid-rise, going from a gas central water heater to a central heat pump water heater, it is cost effective in all climate zones. I wanted to note that there is a wide range of potential existing condition scenarios, and we're aware that heat pump water heater equipment will require more space and venting. And so there's a caveat here that there are some retrofit costs included, but not significant changes, such as relocating the hot water plant or large structural changes. So I want to note that there is opportunity here for further work to better understand what is the likelihood of needing to relocate your entire water heater system or and the associated costs. And so it could be reasonable to add an exception if relocation costs are significant, given the uncertainty kind of range of possible existing conditions. Now I'll hand it back to Avni for some conclusions.
Okay, okay, yeah. I think we pretty much covered all the information. So I want to summarize our conclusions on cost effectiveness. The heat pump space conditioning is cost effective in majority of the climate zones. The incremental costs have been pretty competitive or very similar, and hence we can see the cost effectiveness. For the heat pump water heating, the central is shown to be cost effective with the caveats that Ada shared, whereas the individual is not cost effective given the high incremental costs. Solar PV is also cost effective in all the climate zones, despite the expiration of federal incentives. Although this does not account for the newest net energy metering updates with NBT. Cool roofs is cost effective, one of the low hanging measures, and it's cost effective in the cooling dominated climate zones. Air sealing, wall insulation has been largely cost effective in many heating dominated climates or moderate ones. Window replacement measure is very expensive and hence not cost effective anywhere. Duct sealing measure is often inaccessible given the location. The only places where we were able to evaluate was low-rise building with attic. So it has limited savings potential given the accessibility and what the existing duct location looks like. Having said this, there are some limitations to interpreting the results because the existing building characteristics vary a lot. And the results that we've shown here are based on specific scenarios that we've assumed based on the market research and trying to cover the different scenarios and the impact of different variables. The costs as well vary a lot. We have looked at multiple different sources and have seen a relatively higher range of minimum and maximum depending on the region, contractors, or what the existing conditions look like, how much relocation or how much updates needs to be done. Next slide. We'll just loosely talk about some reach code pathways that this study can support. Based on the results that we have, it seems like we can do time of replacement with AC to heat pump as a cost-effective measure, or a gas water heater to heat pump water heater, especially for central systems since it is shown to be cost-effective. However, time of replacement also requires gas equivalent pathway. So it will depend on climate zone to climate zone where we are able to create an energy equivalent gas pathway to meet the similar performance for a time of replacement code. For the flex path type of code, there is limited applicability just because there are not many measures which are cost effective and may not give a lot of flexibility in that area. It could also support some specific measure related reach codes like solar PV, cool roof, air sealing, or for specific climate zones, there are individual measures that could be cost effective and can be used as a specific prescriptive reach code option. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And I believe we have Q&A right now. We can take up any questions if you have right now.
Indeed. Thank you, both Ada and Avni. Really appreciate that deep dive into your analysis. Are there any questions for the team here? I know we've answered a few in the chat already. Are there any others?
If I could jump in, I'm just curious if PV and battery was considered, or if that's something that might be considered going forward. Just seems like that's a critical element of successful PV in California at this point.
So PV alone was considered, the battery was not, I believe, it's mainly because of the high costs. Yeah, so the battery measure was not considered, and we did not see enough savings in some of the initial analysis we did.
Thank you.
Thought I would jump into, is the conclusion that the flex path isn't a great strategy for multifamily?
Yeah, I think as a strategy, it is still good. I think FlexPath does offer flexibility to like pick and choose the measures as applicable for the existing building. For this specific multifamily buildings, what we found was most of the measures were either just cost effective or like largely not cost effective. We maybe have like 2 or 3 measures per climate zone. So it's not a long list of like 10, 15 measures as we may have seen in single family. So yeah, just because we don't have a lot of options, I think that's why FlexPath is may not be supported as strongly.
And this is Farhad with TRC. It's a great question, Walker. I think it depends on some further analysis, and I'd be curious what Misty also thinks. But there is some precedence from, I think it's Encinitas, that has a menu of options. I think they have something like 8 measures, and I forget exactly what the trigger is, but you choose one of those measures in a multifamily scenario. And so what this analysis will provide is what is cost effective, what are the relative energy savings, and may help those cities come up with that menu. And I think the tricky part is kind of that trigger. When is it appropriate to require this kind of intervention? If it's only a dwelling unit or only common areas getting renovated at a particular time, do we require that particular measure for that specific section that's getting renovated, a whole building type of measure? But I think that with some further kind of post-processing, that type of policy type could become relevant. So thanks for bringing that question up.
Indeed, I think we actually need a little bit more analysis. We need to look a little bit more at the measures that we have to see if we can come up with some of those equivalencies. As Avni was pointing out, we have a few different measures we can use in order to come up with the kind of the space within which we can play, shall we say.
Yeah.
We have to look at only cost-effective measures, right? And then we can open up the menu for other measures that people can install.
Yeah.
But we have to only look at those cost-effective measures to set that. And we're still doing some analysis on that to try to come up with the equivalencies from a savings perspective, and also those that would work, that are feasible from a site perspective as well. So it's a little bit more challenging with multifamily. It's taking us a little bit longer to try to come up with something there. Much easier on a single family dwelling. Everything's kind of available.
I'm thinking of this, thinking of setting the target score, it might be 2 or 3. And like you said, Miss, you could have a longer list, like people can choose measures that are not cost effective. And I guess achieve the target score. They just have to be able to get to achieving the target with the cost effective non-EPCA. Yeah.
Exactly. We have to set it with all those non-EPCA measures. And then they can use whatever they like. Just because we find something not cost effective, it may be cost effective for somebody as a part of the, within their scope of their project.
Right.
That measure may work for them. Just because we don't find it cost effective, it still might be in their scope. So we try to give them more options. But we do need to do some more analysis. We just aren't quite sure how to set that yet.
Yeah. Okay.
This one's a tricky one.
Yeah. I'm thinking about application and what, you got a single family flex path and I'm low rise multifamily or mid rise, and the code, the policy code, local code adoption can start to get quite complex, which creates concern about implementation at the local level. So, all right,
Exactly.
all very interesting.
Exactly. And especially with multifamily. There's a
Thanks.
lot of concerns there. Awesome. Any other questions? Thank you for that, Walker. No other questions for Avni and Ada? All righty. We're going to go ahead and move on then. I'm going to talk a little bit about some policy options. So we had a good segue there. And both Ada and Avni have covered those. But we're going to just talk a little bit more at a high level of what some opportunities might be. Of course, I'm just going to start with the elephant in the room. There's the huge AB 130 elephant sitting here. As far as we know, the way that this has been interpreted, multifamily is included in all of the residential things. So AB 130 does impact everything that we would be possibly doing here. Right now, I can kind of give you the status update of what we know. And then also we'll look at some possibilities and how we might be able to move forward within those. Right now, what we know is there's about 40 jurisdictions that have adopted some sort of an energy-related ordinance out there. We are not sure right now exactly how many have submitted to the BSC. Unlike the CEC, that process doesn't get docketed or anything like that, so there's not a public record that we can just easily check to see. So we're not quite sure how many are at the BSC being processed right now of those 40. We do know that there are about 10 jurisdictions approximately that have received questions from the BSC about their ordinance. As far as we know, those jurisdictions received pretty much all the same questions, especially if it was an exception 5 or a general plan exception ordinance. And we also know that many of those jurisdictions have replied to the BSC. They responded to the questions. At this time, we're waiting for the BSC's reply back. So what we don't know ultimately is, of course, the thing we're all waiting to know, right? Which is ultimately what will be the decision, what kinds of changes are going to be accepted, and how do we need to document them. What we are hearing is that there's a bit of a focus for those ordinances that are based on exception 5, that general plan exception. There's a bit of a focus on the incentivizing piece, but we're not quite sure what the ultimate answer will be yet. So I just want to let you know that we are still in the process. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. We have not really gone through the entire process. No jurisdiction has really gone through the entire process of talking with the BSC and working with the BSC to figure out how they might be able to structure things to go through. And so we just don't know how that's going to come out. There are many people that are engaged here and hoping and trying to support this process. So you're not alone out there. If you are in this process or if your jurisdiction is going through it, we have a lot of support available. Please do contact me if you need any of that support or would like to get connected with those folks. We have made sure that all the people that have received questions from BSC are in contact with each other so that they can coordinate if necessary. So we're trying our best to support everybody through this process. But like I said, right now, mostly what we have is uncertainty. And so we're still hoping for the best outcome. There's still the possibility for that best outcome, and the gate will open wide and we'll go back to business as usual. There's also a possibility for all the other outcomes as well. So we're just continuing to move through it. We're trying to organize people that are going through this process to get everybody together so that we have the communication is good between people and everybody knows what's going on. So if you'd like to get on that list, please let me know. So that's where AB 130 is. So assuming all gets worked out, there's some policy opportunities, right? In the meantime, we have to assume that the gate's going to open for us. So looking at what opportunities might be out there, both Ada and Avni went through some of these possibilities, but just kind of going to review really quickly for what might be there. And for new construction, really, the policy is probably going to be performance-based. Most new construction projects comply that way. And so it's very likely that that's going to be the best policy option. And that's the kind of structure that the team was talking about on the new construction analysis. Generally speaking, you can meet that. You can meet the target and the source margins that we were talking about with an increase in the solar thermal water heating capacity. There are some efficiency and renewable measures that can also be added there. And for low rise, that's one way they can get credit is to install that battery. We did not look at it as a cost-effective measure up front because we don't think it's cost-effective, or it didn't come out as cost-effective in that analysis. But again, it may be for somebody. And batteries are not required for low rise. They are required for high rise. And so there's already a battery in place. And so that's something to look at. But there are a couple of different ways. Low rise has a little bit more flexibility, as it turns out, to meet that target. But it's likely going to be something that's a performance metric. And that tends to be actually one of the easiest ways of setting a policy because it just requires that you exceed the minimum requirement by a certain amount. Generally, that amount is printed right on the form as well. So it's really just a matter of reading off the number and doing the standard reviews and things like that and making sure that they hit that target. So that's the likely opportunity in new construction. And then for existing buildings, as Avni was saying, there's a few different possible paths there. One, we saw that PV was indeed cost effective, pretty much across the board here. And so that's one possibility. You could do something like that as a prescriptive option. You could require that under certain circumstances, a project would have to add some PV capacity. There may be an opportunity to do something where we trigger at HVAC replacement. So something like an AC to heat pump. Again, we've got a little bit more analysis we need to do there. The heat pump option looks really good, but we've got to figure out kind of on the other side what might be equivalent from an energy perspective, but also what's a feasible requirement. One of the things that I think Ada was pointing out was that in some areas the ducts are between floors, and so duct sealing may not be feasible in many cases. So we've got to be careful to try to set that way. But we are doing that, and we are going to be doing that analysis, and that could be one way that we ultimately could go. Lastly, there could be some requirements for efficiency and renewables based on some of those cost-effective measures. And that could be something where you do just a prescriptive requirement. For example, it's when you re-roof, you need to do a cool roof. Something like that it could be, and it could be something where we combine measures and try to come up with something where it provides more flexibility for people. So something more structured, like I would say it's kind of, if we get to flex path, it would be a mini flex path. And so, but we are looking for options and how we might be able to combine some things and mix and match to come up with more options for people. So it's not so limited. So there are a couple of different options, different ways to go. And we are looking at some of these to build them out a little bit better for you. And so just kind of keep those in mind as we move forward. There are many, many resources available for you. We have the studies are available on our resources page. You can see here down in the bottom right. This is our kind of a snapshot of our resource page, but we have the existing multifamily building alterations and res new construction there. The alterations study will be available shortly. We're wrapping that one up, but we do have the new construction study posted. It is there and available for you. And let me just really quickly drop that link to that page in the chat here. And so you have that handy if you'd like to go check that out. In addition to that, we do have the Cost Effectiveness Explorer. The Explorer team is working right now to get those results imported into the Explorer. I highly recommend checking out the Explorer if you haven't. It really helps interpret the results of the report for your jurisdiction. So it breaks everything down so you're only looking at results that are for your jurisdiction. It also allows you to play around a little bit with some assumptions about how things might be impacted and things like that. So highly recommend it. If you have an opportunity, take a look at that. It's actually a great tool. It has other features as well. In addition to that, there's a great building stock feature that is really, really helpful if you're thinking of a BPS policy in the near future or even maybe in the further future. But there's a lot of information that you can get from the Explorer. It really, like I said, makes things easier. On the Explorer site, when you go there, there's a little bitty bot. And if you click on that, it actually is answered by a live person, by Jasmine Krause at Policy Studio. And I highly recommend scheduling a walkthrough with Jasmine. It is incredibly helpful, and she can get you traveling right on up that learning curve really quickly. So highly recommend it. And if you, I think Jasmine's here today. Jasmine, if you could drop your email into the chat, that would be great. The other way to do it, though, is, of course, just on the screen. So in addition to those, the program has all kinds of resources that we offer. We can help with model language. We have all kinds of adoption and implementation resources available, checklists, things like that. A lot of templates. And we've done a lot of work with TRC and the team from SVCE and PCE to develop resources for both adoption and implementation, including many different templates that you can take and make your own. So we have them in Word format, in their native format, and they are not branded or anything like that. They're intended for you to take what you'd like from them and use them however you'd like. So please do check that out. They tend to make things a lot easier if you start from, you don't have to start from a blank page. So please do check out the resources. Or give us a call, contact any of us. We are happy to help wherever we can. And with that, I'm going to say thank you to everybody for making time. Especially thank you to Ada, Antonia, and Avni for some great presentations. And I know quite a bit of hard work to get these studies done. And so I wish you all a fabulous day. Thank you very much for coming to the webinar.